With millions of species sharing our planet, life has found countless ways to survive, thrive, and surprise us. And every so often, scientists discover behaviors that are so unexpected, they challenge what we thought we knew about the animal kingdom. In this video, we're taking a look at some of the most fascinating and unusual behaviors that have only recently come to light. Genets are small cat-like vivarids known for their spotted coats, long ringed tails, and stealthy movements. They're typically solitary hunters, slipping through the night in search of rodents, birds, and insects. But in 2014, one genet in South Africa's Hluliwe Mfolosi Park did something no one expected. Camera traps have been set up in the park to monitor the wildlife. Genets were occasionally captured on camera, as well as Africa's Big Five: rhinos, elephants, buffalo, lions, and leopards. But on this particular night, a camera trap snapped a photo of a genet in the same frame as one of the Big Five, and it was doing something truly strange. As an African buffalo entered the frame, the genet was seen perching on its back, seemingly hitching a ride through the savannah. This apparently bothered the buffalo, so it shook the genet off before moving on. But the genet wasn't done. Later that same night, a different camera caught another African buffalo as it entered the frame, and once again, the genet was hitching a ride. This particular buffalo didn't seem to mind, however, and the genet sat calmly on its back as the buffalo passed by. But the biggest surprise was still in store. As the night went on, the genet was photographed once again, but this time not on a buffalo. The small carnivore was balanced on the back of a black rhinoceros, seemingly at ease while the rhino paid no attention. Park rangers were stunned and couldn't recall ever seeing a genet in the same frame as one of these much larger animals, let alone riding their backs. Just 3 days later, the genet was caught once again on the back of yet another rhino. The behavior is still not understood. It might have been hoping to catch insects that were being stirred up by these large herbivores, or maybe it was using them for protection as it moved through the dark. But the behavior hasn't been observed in the park since. When you think of squirrels, you probably picture them nibbling on nuts or seeds. But in Briones Regional Park, outside of San Francisco, California, researchers recently documented a surprising side to these usually docile rodents. For more than a decade, researchers from the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire and the University of California, Davis had been monitoring California ground squirrels at the park, recording mostly typical behavior. These squirrels are known to mainly eat plants, though they'll occasionally take insects, bird eggs, or even hatchlings. But in the summer of 2024, the researchers noticed something entirely unexpected. Ground squirrels had started actively hunting for a new source of meat. Some students captured footage of a squirrel killing and eating a vole, and what initially seemed like a one-off turned out to be much more frequent than was expected. As they reviewed camera footage and kept watch, they realized that the squirrels were catching voles almost daily. Over the season, they documented at least 37 kills and signs of many more. The squirrels would ambush voles at their burrow entrances, bite their heads or necks to kill them, and then consume them. And it wasn't just a single squirrel. Multiple individuals joined in, often fighting over the carcasses, leading to an increase in aggression among the park's ground squirrel population. Researchers believe that an explosion in vole populations, which was up to 7 times higher than normal that summer, created this unusual opportunity, and they expect that the squirrels will return to their usual plant-based diets as vole numbers inevitably fall. In 1984, in Shark Bay, Western Australia, dolphins were observed for the first time with sea sponges on their rostrums, and researchers wanted to know what they were for. It took a few years to figure out, but by 1997, they had discovered that this was actually the first documented case of tool use among dolphins. Much of the sea floor in the bay is rocky and rough, so dolphins living in the bay are unable to get at the fish that live on these areas of the sea floor, like the barred sand perch. This means that most of the dolphins need to be able to hunt fish quickly in the open water, something that's much more difficult to do for females that are caring for their young. But somehow, a small group of females figured out that if they ripped up a sponge and got it situated just right on their rostrums, they could prod at the seafloor, scaring up these bottom-dwelling fish and catching them with ease. In fact, researchers performed an experiment using sponges attached to the end of a pole, and they found that this method would scare up a fish on average every 9 minutes, and that the ground-dwelling fish had very predictable swimming patterns, making this form of hunting very worthwhile for the dolphins. The use of sponges as a hunting tool has only been documented in a small group of dolphins all living in Shark Bay, and all of which are descendants of other dolphins that were known to do the same hunting behavior, meaning that this practice is a cultural tradition. Pollination is most commonly done by insects and birds, but there are some mammals that help pollinate flowers as well, such as bats, sugar gliders, and marsupial mice. But in the Webb Valley of Bale Mountains National Park in Ethiopia, it was recently discovered that a rare, large carnivore was taking part in pollination, a discovery that is the first of its kind. The Ethiopian red-hot poker grows in the valley, where it was believed to primarily be pollinated by the region's sunbirds, as well as various insects. But a recent study has found that the flowers are being visited just as frequently by Ethiopian wolves. Ethiopian wolves are best known as skilled hunters of rodents on the alpine grasslands, but over the last few years, they've been caught regularly seeking out Ethiopian red-hot poker plants to lick nectar from the flowers. The wolves were observed licking 20 to 30 flowers in a row for anywhere from 3 to 15 seconds each, and between each visit, pollen was visibly present in the hair on their muzzles. This pollen would inevitably be carried between plants, meaning that the wolves are likely helping the flowers reproduce, marking the first time ever that a large, obligate carnivore has been documented acting as a pollinator. In 2016, some researchers from the Group for Research and Education on Marine Mammals, also known as GREM, were filming beluga whales in Canada's St. Lawrence River when they made an astonishing discovery. A juvenile narwhal, estimated to be about 2 years old, was swimming with a pod of juvenile belugas. Not only was it strange to see the narwhal living in such close proximity to the belugas, but also strange to see a narwhal in the St. Lawrence River, which is over 1,000 kilometers from the Arctic waters where the species normally lives. With its gray speckled skin and signature long tusk, the narwhal stood out, yet the belugas treated it as one of their own. Drone footage captured them rubbing against each other, blowing bubbles together, and even engaging in social games typical of juvenile males. Despite the fact that the two species are related, narwhals and belugas rarely mix. But these belugas seem to accept the narwhal entirely, almost as a foster member of the group. But how did this narwhal come to be living with a group of belugas? The main theory is that it likely got lost during migration. Being a social animal and not fully mature, it may have encountered the belugas by accident and latched on for the sake of survival. However it came to pass, it was observed multiple times over the course of several years. The narwhal might mate with a female beluga, creating an exceptionally rare hybrid. Researchers in Iceland recently observed something strange happening with another group of cetaceans, orcas. They too were associating with other cetaceans, but they weren't being quite as friendly as the belugas in Canada. It began in 2021 when researchers watching a pod of orcas feeding on herring noticed a calf in the group that seemed to be in trouble. It was way smaller than an orca calf should have been, was all black, and had a smaller dorsal fin than normal. but it didn't take long for them to realize that this wasn't an orca calf that was struggling, but a pilot whale calf. So what was it doing with these orcas? From 2021 to 2023, the orcas were recorded apparently kidnapping pilot whale calves and swimming around with them. At times, they were treated well, as if they were being cared for. They normally swam behind the adults and were nudged along, just like an orca calf would be. But at other times, it was clear that the calves were in distress. They were occasionally observed trying to swim ahead as if to escape, before being reeled back in by the pod. On one occasion, the orcas were recorded catching up to an escapee, flipping the calf upside down and pushing it up out of the water on their back. A paper published earlier this year offers 3 possible explanations for this strange behavior. The first is that the orcas are extending their paternal instincts to the calves of other species. They come across the young of another cetacean, and an innate desire to care for it kicks in. If this is the case, the calves that end up getting adopted are extremely unfortunate, as none of the females in the pod were observed to be lactating during these events, meaning that the pilot whale calves wouldn't survive for long, likely succumbing to starvation. The second theory is that this is a form of play that's intended to improve hunting skills. While the orcas around Iceland primarily eat fish, they are also known to eat seals and porpoises. The observed instances of the orcas chasing the calves as they try to escape could be practice for future hunts with more agile prey. But the third theory is the most chilling. It's possible that the orcas take the calves with the full intent of consuming them later on, and that they carry them along as a form of lunchbox, keeping them as a ready-to-eat meal the next time they get hungry. Researchers think that predation is a less likely theory, as the pods seem to show more care to the calves than aggression, but much is left to be discovered. They also don't know how the orcas get the calves from the pilot whales in the first place, and whether they consume or abandon the bodies when they die. Speaking of animals kidnapping members of another species, a similar behavior was recently observed in Capuchin monkeys in Panama. On the remote Jicaron Island, part of Panama's Cueva National Park, researchers have documented an unsettling and baffling behavior among white-faced Capuchin monkeys. The island is difficult to access, having no human population or infrastructure, so researchers rely on camera traps to observe the animals living there. And in 2022, while watching some recordings of the white-faced Capuchins, they noticed that a group of 5 young males were appearing on occasion carrying an infant. Even more surprising was that it wasn't a member of their own species, but they were actually kidnapping the babies of Cueva Island howler monkeys, an endangered subspecies that also lives on the island. Over the course of 2 years, they found that these 5 Capuchins had kidnapped baby howler monkeys at least 11 times. After kidnapping them, they would carry the infants around on their backs or bellies while continuing with their normal activities. The babies clung on just like they would to their own mothers, but the male Capuchins offered no care, simply carrying them around until they died of starvation. At first, it was thought that the Capuchins were stealing these babies to consume them later, but they weren't recorded being violent towards them in any way, and they were never recorded consuming them. So why were they kidnapping howler monkey babies? The main theory is that these Capuchins, which live on a small, predator-free island with plenty of food, simply acted out of boredom or curiosity. An act of kidnapping for fun performed by one monkey sparked a fad that spread among this group of young males. Researchers believe that this is the first known case of cross-species infant kidnapping for fun that forms part of a social tradition among primates. What makes this behavior concerning to researchers is that Cueva Island howler monkey females typically produce only one baby every couple of years, and the loss of even a few infants could threaten the survival of the local population. In 2002, Parque Reptilandia in Costa Rica obtained a female American crocodile named Coquita. For 16 years, she was enclosed alone at the park, where she was a major attraction for tourists. Every year, she would lay a clutch of eggs. But of course, every year, those eggs were infertile and discarded. That is until 2018. That particular year, Coquita laid a clutch of 14 eggs. And when zoo staff candled them, they noticed that 7 had the potential to be viable. But how could this be? They insisted that Coquita had been left alone for years, and they had never detected another viable egg from her in previous clutches. Nevertheless, they placed these 7 eggs in an artificial incubator to see what would happen. 6 of the eggs didn't develop, but 1 did, eventually forming into a nearly fully developed crocodile. But before it got the chance to hatch, it sadly died. The zoo staff was interested to know how this happened, so they sent a scale from the embryo and a scale from Coquita to be genetically tested in order to find out who the father could be. In 2023, the results of the study were published, and it turned out that the unhatched crocodile was actually a 99.9% match to Coquita, meaning that she had laid a fertile egg all on her own through a form of asexual reproduction known as parthenogenesis. Parthenogenesis is sometimes referred to as a virgin birth. The process is well documented in some insects, fish, birds, and reptiles, but this was the first ever confirmed case in a crocodile. Scientists believe that parthenogenesis could be a sort of reproductive backup for females that can't find a mate, but it's not a perfect substitute. These offspring tend to have reduced genetic diversity and may struggle to survive, which is likely the reason that Coquita's egg failed to hatch. Octopuses are known for being intelligent, curious, and sometimes surprisingly feisty, but in 2015, scientists studying wild octopuses in Jervis Bay, Australia, captured something no one expected. They recorded octopuses throwing things at each other. The team had set up underwater cameras to observe the day-to-day lives of the gloomy octopus, a species common in the area. Most of the time, the octopuses were seen going about their usual business, but every so often, one would gather up shells, silt, or bits of algae in its arms and launch it through the water with a forceful jet from its siphon. At first, it wasn't clear if these throws were just part of clearing out their dens or rearranging the seafloor, but the researchers noticed a pattern. Sometimes an octopus would aim directly at a neighbor, and the debris would hit its mark. In some cases, the targeted octopus would duck, flinch, or even raise an arm as if to block the incoming material. It seemed that these throws were deliberate. Over the course of the study, researchers documented more than 100 throws. In some of them, the octopuses even changed the color of their skin to a darker tone, a sign that they might be agitated. And they tended to throw harder when another octopus was right in front of them. It's still not fully understood why the octopuses do this. It could be a way of settling boundaries, telling a rival to stay back, or maybe it's just octopus-style mischief. In 2023, research across Kenya's Amboseli National Park and Samburu Reserve revealed something extraordinary. African bush elephants may actually call each other by name, making them the only other species besides humans to do so. Over 4 years, scientists recorded 625 deep, low-frequency calls elephants use, known as rumbles. Then they used a computer model to analyze these calls, identifying 469 unique rumbles and linking them to specific individuals based on who responded. In tests, elephants responded more strongly to the rumbles that were clearly addressed to them, and they tended to ignore others, suggesting that each rumble contains a unique identifier, just like a name. When researchers played back recordings of a call containing what they believed to be an elephant's specific name, the listening elephant would react by lifting its head, flapping its ears, and responding vocally. Elephants appear to be the first documented case of non-human animals using arbitrary labels to individually address one another. Researchers believe that this naming likely helps elephants maintain bonds and coordinate social groups over distances, especially mothers calling to calves or leaders summoning stragglers. And that's it for today's video. What animal behaviors do you think are the strangest? Let me know in the comments below. A special thanks to my patrons. Thanks to their ongoing support, I'm able to make a video like this every week. If you want to support the channel, consider joining us on Patreon. The link is in the video description below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.